The world's most vital maritime shortcut, the Suez Canal, is once again standing at the edge of crisis. For a brief moment, it looked like things might settle. Naval escorts were in place, global shipping lines were reassessing risk, and some vessels even dared a cautious return. But now, fresh waves of violence in the Red Sea have brought that fragile optimism to a halt. The resurgence of hostilities, particularly from Yemen's Houthi rebels, is doing more than just disrupting transit lanes. It's shaking the very foundation of how global supply chains operate. This isn't just a local conflict anymore, it's a serious choke point event with implications that stretch far beyond the Middle East. We're talking about ripple effects on fuel prices, freight rates, insurance premiums, inflation projections, and even stock market behavior. Major economies, from the United States to Europe to Asia, are watching closely, because when the Red Sea turns red hot, it forces everyone to recalculate logistics, risk, and resilience. If you want to stay ahead of these fast-moving developments and truly understand how global trade is evolving in real time, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel, US Trade and Tariff Watch. Every week we turn complex trade issues into clear, actionable insights that help you stay informed and one step ahead. Now let's dive in and break down exactly what's happening, and why the Suez Canal, despite being open, might remain eerily quiet for the foreseeable future. The Red Sea, a historically vital corridor linking the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, has once again devolved into a high-risk conflict zone. Once bustling with container ships, oil tankers, and bulk carriers en route between Europe and Asia, this waterway has now become a theater of escalating military and political confrontation. After a brief lull in late February, during which hopes of de-escalation began to form, Houthi rebel forces based in Yemen have reignited their campaign of attacks. These aren't isolated acts of piracy. They're coordinated missile and drone strikes, some carried out with precision-guided technology, and aimed directly at international shipping lanes. Just this past weekend, the violence reached a new peak. A United States Navy destroyer operating in the southern Red Sea came under heavy attack. Houthi-fired missiles killed nearly 20 American service members, a shocking development that prompted immediate and forceful retaliation. U.S. airstrikes targeted Houthi missile sites, drone depots, and radar installations deep within Yemeni territory. It was one of the most intense military exchanges since the conflict began. While the Houthis claim their actions are in solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, the scope and persistence of these attacks suggest broader geopolitical motives, including pressure on Western powers, attempts to assert control over key maritime choke points, and influence regional diplomacy. Regardless of the intent, the results are the same: a dangerous disruption of one of the most strategically important waterways on the planet. At this point, what began as a regional proxy conflict has evolved into a full-scale maritime security crisis with global consequences. The presence of US, UK, and EU naval forces hasn't been enough to guarantee safe passage. And as long as the threat of missile strikes, drone swarms, or retaliatory raids hangs over the Red Sea, the prospect of a full resumption of Suez Canal transits remains dim. Shipping lines are watching closely, and for now, most are staying away. To fully grasp the stakes of this crisis, we have to understand just how critical the Suez Canal is to the global economy. This narrow waterway, only 120 miles long, connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, and in doing so, it links Europe to Asia. It's not just important, it's irreplaceable. To fully grasp the stakes of this crisis, we have to understand just how critical the Suez Canal is to the global economy. Roughly 12% of global trade volume passes through the Suez Canal. That includes everything from oil and natural gas to electronics, cars, pharmaceuticals, and food products. Every single day that this route remains underutilized or avoided due to security concerns means billions of dollars in trade are being delayed, rerouted, or subjected to higher costs. The impact is especially severe for Egypt, which relies on the canal as a top revenue generator. As of March 2025, Egypt is losing an estimated $800 million per month in Suez Canal toll revenue. Annualized, that's nearly $10 billion in losses. A catastrophic hit for an economy already grappling with inflation, a weakening currency, and a ballooning national debt. The Suez has long served as a critical source of foreign currency reserves for Egypt. So the drop in revenue also threatens the country's ability to pay for imports, repay international loans, and stabilize its financial system. But the damage isn't limited to Egypt's fiscal health. The ripple effects spread across the shipping industry and global supply chains. Major carriers, including Maersk, MSC, Hapag-Lloyd, CMA CGM, and others, have formally extended their diversions around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa. This route adds an extra 3,500 to 4,000 nautical miles to the journey, translating to delays of 10 to 14 days per voyage. For time-sensitive shipments, that's a logistical nightmare. The added distance also means significantly higher fuel consumption, more emissions, and increased wear on vessels. Operational costs have spiked by hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars per trip, depending on the size of the vessel and type of cargo. These costs don't just hit the shipping companies, they're passed on through the supply chain and ultimately land on the doorstep of the consumer. What we're seeing is a supply chain that's not just slowed down. It's been forced to reconfigure, absorb new costs, and prepare for longer-term instability. This crisis isn't just about ships changing direction or avoiding a specific route. It's a shockwave that's reverberating through the entire global economy. The Red Sea disruptions are triggering a domino effect, with consequences reaching all the way from factory floors in Asia to retail shelves in the EU. Retailers across Europe and North America are already sounding the alarm. Inventory gaps are beginning to appear, particularly in sectors that depend on tightly scheduled maritime deliveries. Shipments that were expected in 2 weeks are now taking 4 or 5. That delay doesn't just mean empty shelves, it disrupts seasonal promotions, launches, and even consumer behavior. For example, fashion retailers may miss narrow windows for spring collections, while electronics companies risk delays in launching new products. What's making the situation worse is the return of unpredictability in global shipping schedules. something the industry has worked hard to stabilize since the pandemic. Now, congestion is building again at transshipment hubs like Algeciras, Colombo and Jebel Ali, where rerouted vessels are arriving in unpredictable clusters. This phenomenon, known as vessel bunching, overwhelms port capacity and leads to even more delays in offloading and onward transportation. Industries that rely heavily on just-in-time logistics, like consumer electronics, automotive manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, and fast fashion, are particularly exposed. These sectors don't carry large inventories. A delay in one container of parts can halt entire production lines, as seen in recent reports from European car makers and Japanese electronics firms. Compounding all of this is the dramatic increase in freight costs. According to the IMF, container prices on certain Asia-Europe routes have jumped over 150% since late 2023, and they're still climbing. That's due not only to longer voyages around Africa, but also to increased demand for limited vessel space, rising insurance premiums, and risk surcharges levied by carriers. Ultimately, these rising costs are trickling down to the consumer. Whether it's a higher price tag on imported goods, longer waits for online orders, or higher inflation from disrupted input supplies, the economic strain is becoming more visible with each passing month. In a world still recovering from recent inflation spikes, the Red Sea crisis has the potential to add another layer of complexity to global price stability. While headlines tend to center around disrupted shipping schedules, freight surcharges, and container rerouting, there's a quieter, but equally urgent, crisis unfolding in the background. It's a humanitarian emergency, and it's growing by the day. The Red Sea isn't just a commercial highway. It's also a lifeline for millions of people in vulnerable regions who depend on the uninterrupted flow of food, medicine, fuel, and humanitarian aid. Countries like Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, and Yemen itself rely on Red Sea ports to receive critical imports. When vessels are forced to divert or delay, those essential supplies don't arrive on time, or at all. Relief organizations such as the World Food Programme and Doctors Without Borders have raised concerns about mounting delays. For instance, emergency food deliveries to northern Ethiopia and conflict-affected regions in Sudan have been stuck in port or diverted to longer land routes, increasing both delivery time and cost. In areas where famine and displacement are already widespread, this disruption is more than a setback. It's a life-threatening crisis. The situation is made worse by donor fatigue and stretched resources. Many aid agencies are already operating under reduced funding after prolonged global crises, including COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, and ongoing natural disasters. Now, they're being forced to make hard choices. Delay shipments, reroute through less secure corridors, or even cut the volume of aid delivered entirely. This crisis reveals a sobering truth. While global shipping lines may be able to reroute and absorb costs, vulnerable communities on the ground cannot. They don't have the buffer to wait an extra 2 weeks for medical supplies or to go without food, because a ship was diverted around the Cape of Good Hope. For them, every hour of delay has a human cost. Even with increased naval presence in the region, including U.S. destroyers, British frigates, and coordinated maritime security efforts under Operation Prosperity Guardian, the outlook remains grim. The Red Sea crisis is not just a matter of firepower or convoy protection. The Houthis maintain a firm hold on western Yemen's coastline, including areas adjacent to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, one of the narrowest and most strategic choke points in global shipping. From these positions, they're able to launch missiles, deploy naval drones, and threaten vessels with relative ease, despite targeted airstrikes from the U.S. The group's motivations are layered. Beyond expressing solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, the Houthis see their actions as a means of regional leverage, part of a broader ideological confrontation with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Western powers. These goals aren't easily deterred, and certainly not by short-term military pressure. Shipping companies, for their part, have made their position clear. Without a sustained reduction in risk, they're not returning to the Red Sea. And that's not just about avoiding violence, it's about restoring confidence. Insurers are still charging war risk premiums on any vessel even considering passage through the region. Those premiums can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars per voyage, a prohibitive cost, especially for smaller operators. Even if the violence were to stop today, the perception of volatility would remain. Trust in maritime corridors is hard to build, but easy to lose, and in this case, the Suez Red Sea route has lost a great deal of that trust. Until there is a sustained, verifiable de-escalation and real progress in stabilizing Yemen's political future, the Red Sea will remain a flashpoint, and the shipping world will continue to look for alternatives. The longer the Red Sea remains unstable, the more likely it is that this situation will drive lasting structural changes in global supply chains. What started as a tactical diversion has quickly evolved into a strategic rethinking of how, and where, goods should move across the world. The longer the Red Sea remains unstable, the more likely it is that this situation will drive lasting structural changes in global supply chains. What started as a tactical diversion has quickly evolved into a strategic rethinking of how, and where, goods should move across the world. Already, multinational corporations are accelerating their efforts to reshore or nearshore parts of their production and distribution networks. Countries like Mexico, Poland, Vietnam, and India are seeing increased investment as businesses seek to reduce reliance on long, fragile maritime routes through conflict-prone regions. While these changes were already in motion due to pandemic-related lessons, the Red Sea crisis has served as a powerful catalyst. At the same time, there's renewed interest in alternative overland trade corridors, particularly rail and road links across Central Asia as part of the so-called Middle Corridor, a trans-Eurasian route that bypasses both the Suez Canal and Russian territory. While currently limited in capacity, this corridor has attracted attention from logistics firms and policymakers as a possible long-term hedge against maritime instability. Meanwhile, trans-Pacific shipping routes, particularly between Asia and the U.S. West Coast, are gaining importance as carriers shift capacity and port operators adjust to changing global flows. Ports like Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Vancouver are already seeing fluctuations in container volumes as the industry recalibrates around new realities. Still, for the majority of global shippers, these alternatives come with trade-offs. Higher costs, longer lead times, and increased uncertainty are now part of the new normal. Ocean freight prices remain volatile, delivery timelines are harder to guarantee, and insurance premiums continue to reflect the heightened geopolitical risk. In many ways, this crisis is functioning as a stress test for the global trade ecosystem, a system that was already under immense pressure from COVID-era backlogs, the war in Ukraine, semiconductor shortages, and shifting tariff regimes. Resilience, flexibility, and risk management have moved from buzzwords to top-line priorities in boardrooms across the logistics and manufacturing sectors. But adaptation takes time, and the current system is still struggling to absorb these shocks in real time. For small to mid-sized businesses, the impact is even more severe. Many lack the capital or network reach to pivot effectively, leaving them vulnerable to price swings and supply chain disruptions they can't control. As trade lanes shift, supply chains fragment, and risk becomes a permanent variable, one thing is becoming clear. The age of just-in-time, lowest-cost global trade is giving way to an era of just-in-case, risk-adjusted supply chains. And the Red Sea crisis may go down as one of the defining turning points in that transition. The Suez Canal may remain technically open, but in practical terms, it's never been more deserted. The ships have rerouted, the revenue has plummeted, and the trust, perhaps the most valuable asset in global logistics, has been severely eroded. What we're witnessing isn't just a temporary detour, it's a defining moment for global trade, a recalibration of how the world moves goods across continents. The Suez Canal may remain technically open, but in practical terms, it's never been more deserted. The ships have rerouted, the revenue has plummeted, and the trust, perhaps the most valuable asset in global logistics, has been severely eroded. What we're witnessing isn't just a temporary detour. Hostilities in the Red Sea have turned what should be a routine shipping lane into a high-risk battleground. And despite military patrols and international condemnation, there's no clear roadmap to restoring safe, stable passage through this corridor. For now, rerouting, rethinking, and restructuring remain the only real options on the table. Businesses are reworking supply chain models. Consumers are already seeing subtle shifts in product availability and pricing. And policymakers are waking up to just how vulnerable even the most established trade routes can be in today's geopolitical climate. One thing is abundantly clear: we've entered a new era for global shipping. An era defined not just by speed and efficiency, but by resilience, adaptability, and strategic foresight. Companies that embrace flexibility and invest in diversified logistics will come out ahead. Those that cling to legacy models may find themselves increasingly exposed. If you found this breakdown helpful and want to stay informed as this story continues to evolve, support the channel by hitting that like button and subscribing to US Trade and Tariff Watch. We're committed to bringing you clear, fact-based updates on the trade issues shaping our world, from global crises to policy shifts and everything in between. Thanks for watching. And until next time, stay informed, stay prepared, and stay safe.